we have lost in the front line, whom we have lost in defending the nation and the territory against the marauding mobs that always attempted to reach to the homelands of Kuki-Zos people. So it was a kind of a bloody battle that you had to fight. And I should say that you have fought it with all your capability, with all your might. You were never the attackers or the aggressors. The aggressors came from, and they were trying to do victim blaming, victim shaming all the time in the national media and in other forms of media. As a conscientious observer, as an independent political analyst, I had to say the truth that was unraveling before my eyes. And the truth is that one has to unabashedly, without any remorse, one has to speak for the truth, one has to stand with the victims, come what may. And with this resolve, I stood with the vulnerable and the victimized in my argumentation before the media, before the world. And in certain cases, the argumentation was so difficult because they were blurring the lines, the blurred lines between a victim and a perpetrator had to be unraveled before the world. We had to show clearly who is the aggressor and who is the fallen victim. So on 3rd of May and 3rd of May onward, the whole month, the first phase of the violence, as Kuki-Zos calls it, then there was a second phase of violence, and there was a third phase of violence. At each phase, violence was organized by a regime. The violence was not something that has happened sporadically and spontaneously out of some anger or desperation. But the violence was organized by the regime. It was a regime-organized violence. And the regime hasn't yet gone. The regime still works through stealthily, surreptitious, clandestine means and targets Kuki-Zos people. More than physical targeting and violence, the canards, the vile campaign that was launched in terms of terming the whole community as narco-terrorists, as illegal immigrants, was something more depressing. I am neither a Kuki nor a Meitei, but to hear that one of our well-known, historically settled, having a long history of its own glorious past, a community, Kuki-Zos, is named as illegal immigrants. I personally do not believe that any human is illegal. The very connotation of terming a community as illegal immigrant itself raises a lot of hackles in terms of laws, in terms of a democratic constitution under which we are currently living in our very dear country, our motherland, India. Fortunately, it is inhabited by Meitei population. They also have an ancient history. They have their days of glory. They have their days of fall. And every community has a history of glory and a history of fall. So therefore, there is nothing to feel very specially glorified in terms of one's own history. It cannot be the case that a particular community gets a greater glorification, except their own acts of glorifying themselves. History really doesn't glorify a community or a human society per se, because history is a history of all kinds of struggles, all kinds of bloodsheds, all kinds of even vile activity. So therefore, a glorified history is just a cover-up of all kinds of vicious activities that went on underneath. So those who claim that kind of a glorified history has to be very much aware of these pitfalls of history as well. So therefore, I don't want to delve into the specificities of Meitei history. That's not my area of specialization as well. But suffice it to say that community, which even includes Tangkul Nagas as part of the Meitei tradition, where all these traditions have gone. Can we forget our own tradition, even if there are skirmishes, riots, and clashes? Can we exclude those whom we have once included and become totally anemic towards them and turn them into our enemy? What is this adversarial mentality that has been nurtured through generations in a certain community? This adversarial attitude certainly is not going to bring any good to the community which is nurturing it in their children, going down to their children. Because going down to their children intergenerationally, the hatred, the rage will only produce more and more violence. And a large part of violence will also be directed at you. So better be aware that don't perpetuate this kind of a regime of violence. This is a form of regimented violence, led and orchestrated by organized gangs. So please disarm these gangs. I'm using it in the sense Mahatma Gandhi has used. Mahatma Gandhi's concept of self-governance is community-centric. An institution of governance cannot be imported from elsewhere. Institution of governance must be ruled and controlled by the people themselves, which Gandhiji called as Swaraj, or self-governance, governance by the self. Isn't Kuki-Zos community entitled to have self-governing institutions? Certainly. But look at the condition of the tribal councils in Manipur. Elections to the tribal council is long overdue. In fact, tribal councils have been made defunct. And distribution of funds between valley and the hills is another area of contention. Less said the better that the hills remain totally neglected in comparison to the kind of development work, the kind of investment that goes in the valley.